You're listening to another episode of Battles with Bits of Rubber.
Yeah, we are talking about the Prosthetics Event in Coventry yesterday, Saturday, November 13th. It's now Sunday the 14th, and Stuart and I are in Bolton, prepping to teach over at the university on Monday and Tuesday.
Yeah, and it's good. And today's been a good recovery day, actually.
Yeah, it's not even 7:30, and we're both in shutdown mode.
Yeah, well, the trouble was we had a lot of Indian food, so I'm full up. It was delicious, but it's also
quite filling
into a state of
and spicy.
Coma. Yeah, that was amazing. But yeah, so I'm just full and ready to sleep, which is not good. So I figure we should probably have a quick catch up chat and podcast chat before we become insensible.
Yeah, it was my first TPE, and I hope it won't be my last because it was great fun. It was kind of a who's who. Ian Morse, Joe Nazaro, Cliff Wallace, Bill Corso, me. We had a great conversation with Paul Savage, who was an amazing paramedic and educator and quite a good makeup artist now.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff.
Nick Dudman, Neil Gorton was doing demos, and Neil started the event, so it's his baby.
Yeah.
Who am I missing?
Jake Garber. We had a nice
chat Jake Garber. My God, we had a fabulous conversation with him, which I hope will be one of our best podcasts.
Yeah, it was an amazing chat. It's really, really cool. Yeah, it was very good. So yeah, we're just kind of like prepping for that, and I know I've got a bit more to do for a presentation tomorrow, but it was just good to go through what it was, because we set up a stand there, didn't we, for our podcast, which we did record one podcast there.
Yeah.
And I intended to do more, but I kind of completely forgot about the fact that
it was a crazy day. Yeah, I just point me in the right direction, and that's where I'll be. And I wound up judging a prosthetic competition and doing portfolio, which we both did portfolio surgery for a number of people. And
well, I did 3, but it took me 2 hours to do those 3.
Yeah, and I did 5.
So yeah, it was quite thorough.
So it was a busy day.
There was a lot of talking, and I racked up about 10,000 steps, which is because it was big venue, so walking around. But it was awesome. It was really, really good fun. So that's very cool.
And much beer was consumed.
Yeah, it was a light night. But very, very good. But yeah, it was interesting. And what was nice was, I think, I don't know your experience of the portfolio surgery, but it's quite a nice intimate thing. So it's just one person talking to one person.
Yeah, one-on-one.
So, you get a lot of information and a lot of detail. And I spoke to 3 people, and a lot of people that are doing the portfolio surgery at college, or they just left college, and obviously they want to appraise the portfolio. But what we kept seeing a common theme, I think, between people who are artistic and talented and work hard and are doing all the right things, but I think they feel intimidated by people who are very successful online, who are sort of influencers, who may not necessarily be.
I feel a little bad for the young lady who pulled Bill Corso as her portfolio surgery critique, but at the same time, how fortunate was she to have somebody like Bill Corso to look at her work and give her career advice?
Yeah, that's pretty slick. Although, like you say, quite daunting but who better?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting.
Jake was doing some critiquing, as was Cliff Wallace.
Yeah, no, it's good to have that, because I don't know if you get to choose who, so it's a bit of
no.
A
I was just
assigned these.
Yeah, I kind of lucked out, because I think, with the exception of one of the students' work I looked at, they were all last year's MA graduates from Falmouth.
Right.
Whose work is exemplary.
Yeah.
And, I had a few suggestions on what they could do to improve the presentation a little bit, but the quality of their work is already really good.
Excellent. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? But that was the thing. I noticed that the quality of the work is good, but people's confidence about how they feel they can show their work is not necessarily in line with how good it is. Yeah. So what I mean is, there's almost like a direct correlation between how good your work is and how much you promote your work. It's almost like a lot of the people that are shouting the loudest on social media are the ones that are actually not working as hard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's a really,
there
really
seems to be a
talented
reverse
people.
correlation between the self-promotion and the quality of the work.
Yeah, and so
I think the nature of artists in general, I think, is somewhat introverted.
Yeah.
That, and as I talked with the students at Falmouth University earlier in the week, I was there on a Wednesday. We spent a good part of the day talking about the nature of being an artist.
Yeah.
And, we're never satisfied with our work, and I think that plays heavily into feeling insecure when showing it to other people.
Yeah, there's insecurity, but what I find odd is that the insecurity is increased by the fact that there are people who appear to be not insecure, who are very prevalent, who may have many, many thousands of followers, but actually what they're doing isn't necessarily good work. It's just eye-catching and appealing to a certain demographic. It's not a demographic and they're going to pay for that.
Yeah,
though.
and that demographic is not really schooled or educated or, frankly, qualified to judge good prosthetic makeup work.
No, but it's enough for them to feel intimidated to not feel like they might feel like, what's the point of me putting my work out there? I'm not going to even get seen because this person here who's getting paid sponsorship, blah blah blah, is going to walk all over me. So
right,
why bother? And so I think tomorrow when we speak to people at Bolton, I think it'd be really nice to have that conversation
and try to help find a workaround.
A workaround, but also just to speak to people who are at that age group who are trying to do that stuff.
The TikTok generation.
The TikTok generation, yeah. But they're the ones that are going to be...
I don't mean to offend anyone by that either.
No, well, I mean, I'm not on there. I don't really...
I don't understand TikTok.
No, but when
I'm open to education.
Yeah.
If anyone wants to help out, but
yeah,
I'm not. My brain has not wrapped around that yet.
Known to little 30-second segments. But it's just the thought of what I mean is, my experience of talking to those people made me think, oh, this is something worth pursuing, and I think the people we should pursue it with are people who are at that age who could. Do you know what I mean? It would be good to have a conversation with 20 people who could articulate better than I could the intimidations involved in presenting your work online, because I see I see things that annoy me, but they may not be what are annoying them.
Yeah. Well, one of the other drawbacks of presenting your work online is the anonymity of those who criticize or critique, or who are looking and replying. Though there are a lot of sycophantic responses where you could show a piece of dog shit with a flower stuck in it, and people go, "Oh my God, that's brilliant."
Yeah,
don't stop doing what you're doing.
No, it's a weird one, but it's trying to figure out who your clients are as well. I mean, the thing is that most of the people that I get paid by, that I work for, are not people who are looking for me on Instagram. They're people who I already know and are working on shows. So the things that I can supply that they need, they know I have. Whereas I think if you're sort of on Instagram and you're trying to gather work, Instagram is a good place to put your work, but it's not necessarily where the paying clients are looking for their workers.
Instagram should not be the only place where you are presenting your work.
Yeah, you might get found there.
It can be one of several, but you really need a website that's dedicated to just showing professional work and finding gainful employment, even if it's contract work.
Absolutely, but I'm just wondering if someone was looking for a serious prosthetic make, like the person that's going to hire Barry Gower next won't find him on Instagram. They'll find him through production routes, through recommendations, because of previous Emmy award-winning work. Mm-hmm. So he already has do you know what I mean? He's on a certain radar that people are looking at, and so it's a case of knowing what I'm saying. Is I don't want people to look at Instagram and go, "Oh, I can't compete with that," and go, "Yeah, but you don't want those people anyway because they're not the ones paying for your for you." Because the people who are admiring the stuff on Instagram aren't also shelling out hundreds of thousands of dollars for effects.
Yeah, Instagram is just one place, one ingredient in a means to an end.
Yeah,
but don't let it be the only one and certainly not be the most important one.
Yeah, it's an interesting one though, because it's something that I never really got until I spoke to all of these people about how confidence was knocked by it. And it's this common theme, and it always comes back to, I think, what they're seeing other people do, and it's that feeling of, oh, other people are doing better, because you can't see other people's failures, you only see their success.
Yeah, and you cannot judge your own failure or success by the failure or success of other people.
No,
because they don't matter.
No, you just want to be better than you were yesterday.
Only you matter. Yeah, you only want to keep improving.
Yeah, it's a really weird one. So I'm looking forward to bringing that up as a theme, a conversation. We'll let them kind of lead it, and we'll record that conversation and see how it goes. But it'd be good to get some kind of resolution about it. Figure out whether what I think is the problem, and I can be told what's wrong with my assumption about that, and what we can do about it, because it does seem like it's really holding a lot of people back.
Mm-hmm.
Really talented people who are very good,
yeah,
are not getting seen and not getting noticed, and I think it's probably because they're not promoting themselves the right way. But they have the skills; their ability is already greater than many of the people they're envious of.
Oh yeah,
it's just, you can't control your audience. You can't make people like you. You can't make people watch.
For those of you out there who are also in the same boat, we hope this will help you find the tools you need to have a bigger voice.
Well, by the time you guys listen to this, we'll have already had this conversation with the guys at Bolton. So, yeah, by all means, I would say chime in, email us and get in touch, leave comments. And I would like to know your opinion on this, because, like I say, this is just, in my case, it's a 48-year-old man's version of what the problem might be based on what I've observed, what people have told me. But there's massive holes in that. But I only know what I know from my point of view, and there are going to be things that bug other people that have never bugged me, because I haven't had those issues. So without knowing those things, we can't really work together to address them and figure out what they are. So my mission with this is to try and see that people who are good at what they do can feel good about what they do. Do you know what I mean? They should feel as good about their work as they should, and not just feel intimidated because they haven't got 1 million viewers and someone that's throwing a bunch of ketchup and ham on their face and going, look at me. Yeah, it's got glitter on it, isn't that great? And you can't understand why they've got 10 million views. Because again, when those things happen, it's because there are certain things that are obviously appealing to an audience, and that's fine. It's not the same audience. And again, I was just trying to champion competence over bullshit, because that's what really matters to me, is that you can do something. But
if gaining followers is your aspiration in life, then may God go with you. But if you are aspiring to work on the next Game of Thrones or the next Marvel success story, or you want to work in film and television, then you need to start looking in different directions.
Yeah, it's a weird one, because there are a lot of people I know who are very connected, and they're senior, like I know a director, who has less than 500 followers, because they're not people who are well known in that field.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that doesn't mean they don't do a great job of making a living out of what they do. It's just they're not on Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So
yeah, and a great many of the big folks in the industry aren't on Instagram or Facebook, and certainly not on TikTok.
Yeah, they're too busy doing good
stuff. Too busy working
to get that. So
making lots of money.
It's making that connection between the two things. So the conversation that I had first, we kicked off the main stage, was with a chat with Paul Savage. Now we didn't get any recordings of that, because I didn't want to record a lot, because it was with a presentation, so it wouldn't sound very good without the images, so it wouldn't work very well as a podcast. But we had a chat with Paul afterwards, and he was a paramedic, and he still advises a lot of people, and he had a chat with us about his mission, really, to try and improve casualty simulation through making people realize about realism versus the fake stuff they see on TV. And it was a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, and this applies not just to the medical field, but very much to film and television.
It's interesting, because
he definitely explains it better.
When you're trying to make something graphic and realistic, obviously the trouble with doing clinical realism is obviously things don't look how people want them to look, because you might see a bruise and it's quite understated, and you go, but that's a real bruise. And it's like, well, yeah, but actually for this scene it needs to be more dramatic. So certain liberties are taken. And the trouble is, if that then becomes the baseline, or people refer to that fiction as their reference, then it can kind of get further and further away from reality, to the point where people don't know what real is anymore. And when they see real, it kind of looks wrong to them. And
because virtually everything you see in film and on television is not what things look like in reality.
Yeah, there's a certain...
And those of you who've seen real catastrophic injuries will know this. And sometimes, you're a slave to the whims of the director, who wants something bigger and bloodier and more, even though it's 180 degrees away from reality. That doesn't mean some wounds don't bleed very much.
But it's fun to put fake blood on, so people do.
Yes, and they put more blood, add more blood.
Yeah.
I want gallons of blood. Well, we don't have gallons of blood inside of us.
Yeah. Or you'd stop bleeding after halfway through. All of this stuff I'm learning from Paul. This is a real education for me, and it went down well anyway. And so here's our chat with Paul, and let us know what you think.
And I hope it doesn't make you sick.
And now, Mr. Paul Savage. The crowd of one cheered.
Yeah, we don't do that over here. We're not very good at being showy, are we?
No, I'm sorry I missed your presentation a little bit ago. I heard it was really good.
It was an interesting conversation because I felt that you could tell... Oh, hello. Well, you could tell that it was different from what a lot of people were expecting, I think.
Was it full?
It was pretty full, yeah, and there were a lot of people that came in at different times as well. So
nobody passed out, nobody threw up?
No. So basically, Paul, should we just have a quick synopsis of what the talk was about? Because it was an important one, I think.
So I think we were just trying to get a message out there that if you're going to portray medical simulation or medical moulage in any way, shape or form, that it's as accurate as you can make it, to try and break the cycle of fake news. There's that sort of feeling that, if you tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth. And if, people are doing makeups based on a makeup that's fantasy and it goes down the chain, before you know it, that fantasy's become a reality. So it's about trying to re-educate people about the detail of representation of medical wounds, if that's what you want. And we're not saying there's anything wrong with fantasy and zombie and that sort of stuff, but if you are alleging to portray medical accuracy and it's based on the mythology that you've learned coming down the chain, then that's what we're trying to break. We're trying to break that chain and introduce real accuracy into medical simulation, if that's what's asked of you.
Have you met with much resistance from the entertainment field that have, for quite some time now, been portraying, horrific injuries as, like slitting a throat and it's spewing blood all over the place, wanting to stay with this artificiality instead of going with what would actually happen if you slit someone's throat?
I think the danger is, isn't it? I think there's that crossover where you're going to get the desire of the artistic desire of the director, who's going to try and drive something in a certain way, compared to that desire for reality. And I think it's the pushback will always, I think, be from the senior end of the chain, rather than maybe the makeup artist saying, well, this isn't accurate, but then them being trumped by someone further up the hierarchy saying, this is what's happening, so just make this happen. I know I've been talking to a guy who's a paramedic acting as a medic on a work set, and he's been told to keep his opinions to himself because his opinions are not welcome. He's to go and sit in the caravan and be there if someone is medically poorly and falls over. But until that point, don't comment on the wounds, don't comment on what's happening, because it's none of his business. And I think that's sad when you've got someone who is looking over the shoulder going, it doesn't look like that, that's not real.
Yeah.
And I'm just on this mini crusade just to try and make things a little bit more real.
Well, I know a lot of shows have actual, medical advisors who are there specifically to advise on what's accurate and what's not. And if you are paying someone to be there because of their professional expertise, and you're saying, I don't really want to hear what you have to say, we're just paying you to be here because we need to have a medical advisor that doesn't make any sense to me, though I'm sure it happens.
But it does happen. I mean, I've done a couple of dramas where they did have a pathologist in as an advisor, and his job was to, people would have questions like that. For example, we did a woman had been killed, and there was an autopsy 2 days later, and it was a case of what I don't know what colour the blood would be as they incise her. The whole thing was a close-up of a chest cavity being opened up with a scalpel, and I didn't know what the blood. So I would speak to him and mix the blood up to that colour. So that was really useful. But at the same time, some dramas they want something like Game of Thrones, where they want the spray. And that's fine because that's what it is. But it's that thing of if it's a clinical thing and I don't know the blood should be a different colour, that's what you're trying to sort of point out, isn't it? It's that ignorance rather than it's willful.
And I think people might turn around and say, well, so what? Why is it important? Why is it, why are you keen on this? And I think, what we've seen in the UK is that the generation now that are entering the emergency services, for example, paramedic science has gone across to a degree, and therefore it's not attracting the late 30s, early 40s people it used to in the old days who maybe come out of the military and join the ambulance service. These are now people leaving school and coming to do a BSc and that's what they're doing. And then when you find that from that sort of that BSc, they're arriving and they have that preconception of wounds and medicine based on what they have seen on the television, and that sort of fake news has just run down through that system.
Sure.
And they're not ready for what that degree is trying to do to them.
Yeah.
Do you find some disillusionment among those kids coming into the program, having only seen what they know from film and television, and saying, "Oh, that's not what it looks like on TV"?
Yep, absolutely. And that's where that's starting to affect actual clinical education. That's what really sort of drives me is we're seeing the end result of 20 years of feeding from telly, and TV and film, and then they arrive and the realism kicks in, and it's like, it is literally that. The number of times people say, this isn't what it looks like on television, or this isn't what they do to that person on television. And I think that, maybe people don't want to see accurate medical portrayal. Maybe it's just not nice. Maybe people don't want it. We are, after all, watching television and film for entertainment. But it's what upsets me is when people present things as 100% medically accurate, and they're not.
Yeah. You're doing that compression wrong. That's not how I saw it on ER.
Yeah. Or the thing you pointed out that was very interesting, like somebody who was bleeding, and it wasn't taken seriously enough because it wasn't spraying up the walls. So because their interpretation of a serious bleed is a hose pipe coming out the back of my hand, because that wasn't happening, it's fine. And you're like, no, it's not stopping. That could kill it. He'll pass out before he dies, but he might be on the loo when that happens. So we might not know about it until it's too late. And that's an example of how, assumptions about clinical presentation, you know what I mean, can feed into things.
Sure.
So it's a very interesting angle.
It can't be that serious because there's not that much blood.
Yeah. And then people not realizing, like we've just done in the presentation, actually how much blood you have in you, and simple things like that, where it's amazing actually that we walk around in these shells of human bodies our whole life, and the majority of the population don't have no interest in finding out what's inside them.
Put your hand over your heart, and it's always right by the left shoulder, and it's like, excuse me.
Mine's on my sleeve. It's down here somewhere.
Now, Paul did that thing of like getting everyone to stand up and say, put your hands where your lungs finish, and it's like most people don't know where the lungs finish because they think it's much lower. It's like,
show me where your stomach is.
Yeah, and if you're doing, I guess if you're doing something serious, you would have, you would research and that kind of stuff. But it's those kind of surface assumptions which people take and then spend a lot of time and energy producing a makeup on, and you see that so much, and then it goes on Instagram, and then people just copy the copies of copies of copies, and then you'll see 1,000 pencils up the nose or cans in the eye, whatever. And I'm not denigrating those things as things. How did that part of the presentation
go over?
It was a little stony, but
you just hear the sound of pages ripping out of portfolios.
Well, the thing is, I didn't do it there because we didn't want to do it. I didn't want to. When I've got smaller groups, I have a slide on one of the presentations where I have like literally 100 of these to show everyone how much of an original idea it isn't. And the fact is, what happens is if you're going into professional portfolio, you're trying to show someone stuff, if you've got that kind of stuff in it, it looks like you don't do any other research other than Instagram, which is fine. I mean, it's a very good place to start, definitely. But it's just if you're going to do it properly, seriously, you need to research, you need to feed your brain. And also, just from a standing out point of view, you don't want to be doing what everyone's doing. I think there's a real desire to kind of blend in because you want to belong in a way. You want to look like I do this stuff too. But if it's all the same from a professional standpoint, then you don't stand out. And I say that as someone that's shown this in a portfolio. I'm like, I'd rather see a realistic looking nose. That would impress me more than someone with, I've seen a thing with 50 horns. I've done 100 horns. It's like, yeah, but it's just,
I only need to see 3 to know if you can do it or not.
But humans don't typically have horns, so the fact that there's any at all stops it looking convincing in the first place. It's kind of like I have that thing about pig noses. Like if someone does a pig nose on a make, it can be it could be the best pig nose you've ever applied, but people don't have pig noses. So it looks like a makeup because it's so far removed from what you are used to seeing. And I think the danger with the medical stuff is a lot of people do medical stuff because it looks, certainly from a starting point of view, wounds are a great place to start, because if you sculpt something and you make a mold and it goes a little bit wrong, you can totally put a bit of blood and bruising on it and hide that edge, and it's still a usable piece. Whereas if you did an age makeup that went wrong, you can't really smother it in glitter or bruising.
Well, I had five students showing me portfolios in the portfolio surgery that I did this morning, and there was really only one wound in any of the work of any of them, and it was beautiful.
Right.
And it was done from a reference photo of a saw injury on her father, and it had just the right amount of blood on it. I mean, it was beautiful. And my suggestion was she needs to have the reference image so she can show what she was working from and how good it looks, because it looked absolutely real. And it was a nice gash across the top of the just above the knee, and it wasn't profusely bloody the way you would tend to see a lot of student wound makeups, because it didn't. The original said, the original didn't bleed that much, and I wanted to make sure that I matched that up with the makeup, and it was gorgeous. I wish I could show it to you right now, Paul, because I think you'd really go, this is aces.
It was lovely. Someone came up to us after the presentation and actually had recreated one of the realistic wounds, one of the real wounds we'd shown. She'd really
she had that image prior. Yeah.
She'd recreated the pose, and it was absolutely beautiful. It's an absolutely beautiful portrayal. So, sorry we didn't get your name, but a big shout out to you. It was an absolutely beautiful portrayal of an open fracture. Because she'd taken the reference image and gone from there. And just, I don't know, I'm just passionate about reality.
Well, I think that's something, too, that we can't emphasize enough to people who want to get into this field and learn how to do it, that you have to have a reference image. You can't work from memory, because our memory is going to fail us.
Yeah, or a memory that is at least fed by reference over time.
It may resemble what we remember seeing, but it's not going to be an accurate portrayal. I could draw a picture of a Corvette Stingray that it will resemble a Corvette in some manner, but it's not going to be a Corvette because I'm not working from an actual image or model to recreate it. And it's
and the
really
crucial
important.
is having that reference image from a real source, a genuine source,
Yes.
be it a textbook or be it, because you can't oftentimes get real medical images these days because of the nature of patient confidentiality and such like. But that's the crucial, isn't it? Is that the reference image you're using is not the continuation of the lie being fed down the food chain of someone's imagination 5 layers above you. It's I'm using this reference image because it's as real a photograph as I can get.
Yeah.
From a textbook or from a genuine source, and then I'm taking it from that.
And there are some great text references out there. I mean, there are some forensic pathology books that are accessible. They're quite expensive, but if it's something you want to do, then do it right. It's worth the money.
I've heard you can find them online, and
there's some websites too that cater to images of gruesome deaths that are quite uncomfortable to look at. Frankly,
I think the thing to do as well is part, like you were saying about reading, is important, so you actually understand. I mean, looking at pictures is great, but that forensic pathology book, the J. Dix one, is it Color Atlas of Color Atlas of Pathology, I think it is, and that's a really good one because it takes you from opening the door, there's blood on the floor. Look to the left, we go through this door. Next scene is the person, against this, and then, then here we are on the slab, and this is what we found inside them, and it kind of talks you through the whole process, and it's good because you realise there is a continuum. The picture you're looking at is a real thing that happened. There was a series of incidents that led to that point. There's a series of actions that happened after that point, and this particular instance was, at this point along that continuum. And in a week from now, it'll look different, and a week before that was probably different. So it's good to have kind of couch it in that reality. So reading this stuff as well as having the pictures is important. But yeah, and also learning the medical terms, I think. So like we said, don't put in bullet holes if you're going to do a gunshot wound makeup. Maybe type in the words gunshot trauma or treatment of gunshot trauma or complications of gunshot trauma, and you're more likely to find pictures of real gunshot trauma rather than 1,000 makeups done in makeup school of bullet hole.
And make sure that you know exactly what kind of end result you're working for, because if the goal is to have a body that's been pulled out of a lake that's been in there for 3 or 4 days is not going to look the same as somebody just dumped at the side of the road and found later that day.
But one of the other things as well is the how extensive a makeup can be, even though it's not a lot. Like we were saying about like shock, for example. If someone goes into shock, they may blanch, they may, have that sort of cyanosis-y blue vapor that gets really bad, they get the sweats. And if you're wearing like shorts and go into shock, like your whole body might change colour. And that's a big makeup job. Whereas if they go into shock because of the gunshot wound and you'll spend all your time on this little beautifully made gunshot wound, but everything else is healthy looking, then it doesn't tell the same story. Which from a clinical point of view, especially if you're doing simulation, this is the thing. If you're doing a simulation, it's being viewed by medical personnel who are looking for medical signs, and they're getting either the wrong cue, like you were saying about your strawberry pie face. It's like, how do we treat the strawberry pie to the face?
They come to the wrong conclusions.
Yeah.
And so what I always do, if I'm going to do a patient who's shocked, I always dress them so the only bits of visible skin is their face and hands, because then you can very quickly do a cyanotic makeup on their face and hands, blend it so you almost don't get a farmer tan line, because you don't want that. They roll their sleeve up and there's a farmer tan line. So blend it off, because actually from cyanosis and shock perspective, if all you're asking that medic to do is to log that in the first 10 seconds on scene, that they arrive, because that medical gut reaction is based on, they've done some research based on what is the medical gut reaction when you arrive on scene and go, that looks nasty, or no, that's okay. And it's the mixture of their respiration rate, their conscious state, and their colour, right, general appearance. So if you're there and you go, you imagine arriving on scene, someone's sat up, so they've got a blood pressure, they're sat up, conscious, talking, and pink, breathing normally, you sort of go, and your shoulders go down a bit. Whereas if you walk in and someone's slumped, unconscious, horrendous colour, noisy airway, big difference. So, when we're doing a cyanotic makeup, I try and deliberately make sure no one is in shorts.
Well, we might want to explain to some of our listeners what cyanosis actually looks like.
So cyanosis is it's as you lose blood, you go through pale. So most people know what pale looks like, and then you start to get a blue hue into it. Hence the cyan part of cyanosis. So you start to get a blue hue into your skin, which tends to be the pinkest bit go blue. So if you're doing a face, for example, their face would still be pale, but then their lips, just under their eyes, their ears, the inside, not you're going to make up the inside of someone's mouth, but that would be the areas that you're going cyanotic. And if they've got those sort of big port nose or ruddy cheeks, those bits would be going. So the pinkest bits head to the bluest bits in that sort of what we call a cyanotic presentation, which is a medical term for advanced paleness, if you like. But I just, as I say, just do hands and face, because hands and face with a bit of appropriate sweat, glycerin sweat placed, and you've got that gut reaction from the medic, because that's all you're looking for, is that you walk in and go, got it, that's not good. You don't need it later on because they'll put the cyanotic presentation, then they'll find the wounds and they'll put their jigsaw together. Yeah. It's very hard in medical sim to create, because you might arrive with someone who's bleeding profusely internally, so you see nothing, and as you're with them, their cyanosis appears because they're continuing to bleed, you can't stop it. That's really hard to create without an intervention, and you sort of like pressing the pause button on the sim and jumping in and going, here we go, and making them up, which doesn't happen. So yeah, a nice little handy hint is just think about the clothes you're putting people in, so you're not having to do the whole of their legs and arms and everything, which takes you forever.
Yeah. The other thing as well, when we talk about wax, because obviously wax is a pretty cheap material and you can do some very nice things with it. But the trouble with wax is obviously what you've got to remember is from a simulator point of view, someone's going to treat that. They're going to put their hands on it and put pressure on it and put a dressing on it. And that may be more than one person doing it. And of course, wax is going to smudge and do,
it's going to peel right off when the bandage comes off.
So, if you're going to do wax or dough or whatever, some kind of cheap material, be aware that if someone's going to be touching it, it could just trash it. And all your nice hard work is gone. Whereas if you made a piece or something, which obviously is more expensive and takes more material and time, and you've got to prep these things, but they would withstand being abused. But that's why we use pieces.
Yeah, nose and scar wax definitely has its uses.
Definitely,
but,
yeah.
I think much better suited to still photography than any kind of tactile usage.
Yeah,
where it's going to need to be palpitated, manipulated, and moving.
Yeah, and like you say, if you're starting out, it's cheap. I mean, the first things I bought were wax and a little Supercolor B palette, digital grease paint. You can do an awful lot with it, but it's fine so long as no one touches it and it doesn't move too much. But then you just take those same sensibilities up to, bigger scale. And you're the same. I think you started from your clinical background, and you started doing makeup, and then you started making prosthetics, so you're learning all about the materials and the sculpting. So you're kind of coming at it from the other way, where you're on that journey. But
it's getting there. I mean, I'm surrounded by people who have got more talent in their little finger than I'm ever going to have. And so for me, it's just that ability to help people on the bit that I do know, which is what things look like and the presentation you're aiming for, and the pitfalls when you do enter into playing with either the emergency services or when you're trying to create realistic medical stuff. And that's just helping people with the stuff that I do know rather than worrying about my dreadful prosthetic applications that I do.
It's interesting you were saying about another thing about the responsibility of people who are making makeups and stuff. One of the stories I told was in a job I did called The Walk. It was a drama about 12, 15 years ago. And it was a makeup of a mastectomy. So a woman had one breast removed, and there was a big chest appliance that went all the way from the navel up to the shoulder and under. And she wore a shirt, so all these edges around the back were out of sight. But what was significant is in this scene that the shirt is unbuttoned to reveal that she's had this mastectomy. So it's quite a big sort of scene. And the director was wanting the emphasis, the drama of the scene. He wanted to have a big ugly scar there. And the makeup designer, I can't remember her name, I must look it up, but she was very insistent that was irresponsible, partly because it's not true. The surgery is very neat, clean, and if the tissues are all healthy that are stitched back together, then there's very little in terms of scarring.
It essentially becomes plastic surgery at that point.
Yeah, it's very, very neat, but what was striking was the absence of the breast and the difference of colour from the collar that's exposed to sunlight meeting skin from lower down.
Right.
There's a very thin line. And also the fact that the scarring, if you tell people that this is the kind of scarring you might have, people would be reluctant to act on anything. If they found something, they might not get checked out because they're worried cosmetic what the result is. So that has a kind of a responsibility. So she basically made the guy not do that because he just had, off the top of his head, being a bloke, never having had breast cancer, or maybe he hasn't been around it, then it's one of those things where he was like, oh, that's fine, I think this, you all do this. And he's going, well, maybe that's not a good idea, and here's why. And with the gory stuff that we're doing, it could be that you go, look, we can do that, but that wouldn't happen. Here's what would happen. And if you get overridden, at least you know you've been overridden. And it's their decision rather than the case of ignorance on your part. And we're all ignorant to something. We're all going to learn all the time. Every time I chat to you, I learn something else. I'm like, ooh, I feel a little bit clever because I've got a new little thing in my canon. And that's the beauty of this stuff. It's not a case of rejecting new information and being bullshit about what you don't know. It's a case of going, shit, there's tons of stuff we don't know. And it's good to let it in and accept our limitations and critique makeups for the, what they are.
Oh, no, just last night when we were sitting in the pub going over what you guys were going to talk about today, I learned quite a bit. And, and I have a medical background, so... Yes,
that's true. You were doing pre-med stuff, weren't you, before you were doing effects and things. So, yeah, it's an interesting area where makeup and the medical stuff meet, but it's that responsibility, and whose responsibility is it to kind of do that, so... There we go. That's basically the gist of the conversation we had this morning, and I hope it went down well. We'll find out in the fullness of time.
Thank you.
I have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure hanging with you guys for the last 24 hours. I've had
Likewise.
an absolute ball. It's been brilliant.
Oh man, thank you so much.
And it's great to finally meet you face to face.
Absolutely. And, the pub last night was a lot of fun. And just to interact and just, you guys have taught me so much.
Thanks, Paul. That was awesome.
Gentlemen, it's always a pleasure.
You can get in touch through our Facebook page or email us at stuartandtodd@gmail.com. Check the show notes for more information. If you enjoyed this episode, tell someone else and help us grow by sharing it on social media. Thanks for listening.